Thank you, everyone. Well, I know that we have people from different parts of the planet, so I welcome you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And I greet you all with a lot of appreciation for having you here with us today. And in the name of Holo and Holochain, I welcome you. And we're going to introduce ourselves. I think I want to mute people when they are not speaking. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking so we don't have interference. So let us introduce ourselves. My name is Ferananda Ibarra, and what brought me to this work is my passion for collective intelligence and regenerative economies. I've been working with Metacurrency Project and with Arthur Brock for more than a decade. And what you're going to hear today is the outcome for a long journey of a lot of love, a lot of devotion, a lot of learning, a lot of action, a lot of tears, a lot of joy that we have applied for the creation of life-affirming economies and a work that works for all. Is that the center of our work? And I know that many, many, many share that passion and that journey with us. Yeah, I know many of you. I know where you've been. So it's all my hope that you all get that you all get value from this presentation. We have with us today as co-presenter Emaline Friedman, which is our content writer extraordinaire. More than that, it's like I see her constantly expanding into new capacities and new skills, and she's a person that has me constantly surprised. So I'm gonna let her speak and introduce herself. Hi, Em.
Hey everyone. I'm really, really glad to see so many smiling faces here. So just a little bit of background about me. I come to this project. I joined, it was probably only 4 months ago now, and I was in a graduate program doing doctoral research on internet addiction. So I come to this project as a tremendous skeptic who is studying from a sort of individual psychological perspective some issues and pitfalls and things that people see as like problems with being subjects of the online world, as we all are. So I come as a student as well as an educator in the world.
Thank you, Emaline. And we know that Arthur will join us soon. For those that don't know him, he's a mastermind behind the Holo and Holo chain. Through my years of working with art, what I have observed the most is a true heart of service and a clear vessel for change. And he combines his deep wisdom with a bright technical knowledge that I'm very sure you will enjoy, as I have enjoyed for many, many years. He has designed hundreds of currency systems. This is not new. It's not knowledge that came through the awareness of cryptocurrencies. We have other beautiful master currency designers here. So I please motivate you, invite you to be sharing with each other through chat. This is a space that is our common visual space for us to be able to interact with the session as well. And we also have many members of our Holo team. We have Robert Best that will be helping us with our technical part. If anything, gets stuck for you, please contact Robert. You can do so from the chat. If you click where the names are, you can click directly to a person you want to communicate with, and you can communicate with him, and he'll be here in service of us all. He has superpowers in technology and cartography curation, and he is been instrumental for our work. As well, we have Jared and Will. Will is our youngest one of the team, and a true force. He's like really helping us with all our social media and our building our community. And Jared, which I cannot say enough and express enough gratitude for him. He's a true pillar and force on creating what we are about to listen about. So thank you, all of us and all the participants to be here today. I see a lot of incredible people, and I'm very humbled by, because I know many of you, and your bright minds are your bright hearts. So thank you. Ooh, and I must remind myself to breathe And I must remind myself to put my clock so I keep myself in good timing, because we have a lot of things that we want to share today. Here we go. How many people we have? Okay, so we'll continue our work today. So as an introduction, I want to talk about the flow for today. Our intention with this presentation of Decentralization and You is to tell a story about how evolution is opening a path towards decentralized system and distributed architectures that can contribute to shift our trajectory for a finite game. The way I describe a finite game is our current trajectory, where we're depleting our resources on our planet with extraction of resources and soul from individuals as the primary motive of our economy, versus an infinite game where it's life-giving, life-resourced, and that it works for the sake of life itself, and where all agents focus not only on themselves, but also on the preservation and the health of the whole system, because we want regenerativity, vibrancy, and well-being, and supreme innovation and creativity as nature does. So this is not a high-tech session. I know there's some techies here. We'll have some opportunities for that. We're offering live Q&As every week for developers or people that really want to crank the code of the technology. Our main intent is to start giving sessions that will help people to become more empowered in the trends of decentralization and distributed architectures and cryptocurrencies, so that we can go into all of these together. So we'll be sharing insights, and we'll be opening space for conversations, to have the opportunity for people to see and witness and share the incredible, beautiful wisdom that is present in the room. And we'll have also opportunities for Q&A in between presentations. So we'll begin sharing about ethics and technology. We'll share our vision and how we can build the commons into something that is so much larger than any of us. The commons, that is everything that was given to us, all nature and the management of our precious resources, and all the types of capital that we're building together through technology and more. We'll focus very specifically in the data commons, as it's such an important topic for our current times, where there's such abundance of data, and that can really, if we focus it in the right direction, it can really leverage humanity and create goodness and truth and beauty for us all. So it's our aspiration that after this session, you'll start to get a glimpse of what is that you can do to move from centralized control to distributed systems that create life and relationship and through sharing economies. It's our intent in Holo and Holochain to weave a more human internet. So it's very important for me to say this, because other distributed architectures like the blockchain have their focus in a different place. We are focused on agency and sovereignty of individuals, but also on accountability and trust as built-in relationship, where our main purpose is to have every individual have the power to choose, the power to learn, the power to grow and thrive, and that every community has the resources to support the commons and every individual. So we'll be sharing about that and Holo and Holochain, and then Arthur Brock will share his expertise and insights on cryptocurrencies, the topic that is in our collective awareness, and that we are, it's deeply in our heart as well. Because we know that for some people, cryptocurrency and Bitcoins are like, they see this part of the speculative bubble, but some of us also see it as a way to decentralize finances and money. So we can combine this with distributed architecture and decentralized communication, collaboration, law, democracy, forms of production, you name it. So let's go into that. And so this is the first presentation of a series that is meant to be a journey to a deeper and deeper understanding, in the hope that each of you can have a powerful entry point and ride a wave of decentralized and distributed systems with your own version, your own creativity and goals. We'll be also taking a little bit of polls to see where is our collective. I have an accent. I'm from Mexico, so I hope that you're tracking me. Fine. Sometimes if I see something that just goes like, what did she really say? Please turn on your microphone and say, slow down, repeat that, whatever. I'm not focusing on the chat. The team is focusing on the chat, so I will need all of your support. Okay, so here we go. So for a bit of holopticism, I'm going to be opening some polls to have some small vision of our beliefs. And I'm going to use the Zoom poll tool. And I'm going to begin with the first one. You just have to answer, and then I'll be able to share the results with you all. Okay, let's take some time to answer. "17, 21 answers, 22, 23, 24. I want to get to 36, 75%.
Keep them coming.
I know. Woohoo! I'm happy we're mostly okay. 31 of 36, and I'm closing this poll. Here's our results. Yeah. Okay, let's go to our second one. Okay, let's do it. Come on, no one says no. You care about your data? You're so weird. Wow, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm so curious about that. No. 31, 32. Okay, we end that poll and we share our results. Now we go through 3 out of 5. So would you want to see a world where our data is owned within a commons, where you have full sovereignty and control of your data? Is that a world that it's a goal worth accomplishing? Yeah. 83% of us has a vote. Okay, I'm ending this poll. And this is giving us some insight of the whole, right? Some, as we call in collective intelligence, some holopticism, some insight from the whole, from the parts. What is that we're gravitating towards? And of course, thank you. If there wasn't been a yes, then I would say, why are we doing this again? So here we go, our 4th out of 5. What is your level of understanding about cryptocurrencies and how they work? Wow, this is more distributed. Okay, I am ending the poll, sharing the results.
Skeptical and curious. That's a good sign.
Good. I think we have something for everyone in this session. And last but not least, this is an important one because we want to know. Woohoo, some people are already doing it. Oh yeah, many. Wow, 43%. Yes, they have a vision. Yeah, and some are like, what is a distributed application again? Again, we have something for each of you and opportunities to be able to share. Okay, here we go. I'm ending the poll, sharing the results. So we have all kinds of people with all kinds of levels of expertise and technical capacities. And I'm sure that you all find some value in our session today. In the cryptocurrency session as well, we'll have the opportunity to really understand some of why cryptocurrencies fail, and Arthur will share the cycle of cryptocurrencies, and we'll share what is a distributed application and a lot of the decentralization, and we'll make sure to know what is that you are creating. So thank you to all of you. So I'm going to start a session. I'm going to share my screen. And so how many people are we? 39 people. Beautiful. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start with a very small video. It's 2 minutes, and we'll continue our session. So here we go. Let me see. Here's what I want to create to share. And I want to share computer sound. And I want it full screen. And here we go.
You know, we live in a world of wonders, high-tech gizmos that boggle the imagination. We enjoy every single day. I mean, devices that have more complexity and more technology condensed into them than $60 million supercomputers had 40 years ago are something we get to enjoy every day. The supercomputers of yesteryear are in everybody's hands. You know, a young person with a cell phone in Africa has better communications technology than the US president had 25 years ago. So there's no doubt that these are magnificent machines that we use to extend the boundaries of our thinking and of our reach. Nonetheless, people have this problem with technology because they think it's somehow unnatural. Enter Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly's book, What Technology Wants, introduces the concept of the technium. He calls the technium the aggregate of all of our technology. He calls it actually the seventh kingdom of life. He says the technium is self-organizing and has wants and needs and is subject to evolutionary forces. He literally says that evolution is playing out through the evolution of technology. Technology is birthed out of the human mind. If you were able to time-lapse reality, you would see our thoughts spill over into the world in the form of technology. We erect matter in accordance with our will. We reorganize the physical materials of reality and turn them into objects of higher organization. And we give them transcendent qualities. I mean, today we have a device made of plastic and metal that sends our thoughts traveling at light speed across oceans of sky. I mean, the fact that I can talk on the phone with somebody and have what Amber Case refers to as technologically mediated telepathy, mind-to-mind communication, is not just astonishing, but also, according to Kevin Kelly's idea, proof of the flowering of new possibilities, proof that technology is a part of us. It's made of atoms, it's natural, it sits on a continuum between the born and the made. Buckminster Fuller said, start with the universe, the earth, one single system, an integrated system. We are of nature. Anything that is birthed out of us is birthed out of nature. So it's all good. Nothing to worry about.
Such fabulous visuals. I'm so sorry. You know, with technology, something constantly goes wrong. He says he's nothing to worry about. What's up with that? So, sorry. And, oh, okay. So, do you feel it? Were you able to hear it? Were you able to hear the listen to the audio? I know that after a little while, the presentations I kind of said like, "Hey, bring it to the audio was fine." Okay, well, he's pretty synced in, so I'm happy that you could hear the audio. And so the question is, when he says, "Do you feel the organ that is larger than ourselves? Do you feel the potentials and the possibilities?" And Jason says, "Our machine extended the boundaries of our thinking and our reach." And I ask myself, what is our true potential? Can this seven kingdom of life be in service of us all? And what is the goodness of all this power? And can we deploy all this power without owning our collective body, which we're going to talk about? And we have some ideas on how we create a world that works for all, and some are nebulous and some are very practical. But basically, we want to embody a pattern how we play more smoothly together. We want higher ways of organizing ourselves and coordinating. And in Holo, we speak about a ladder of progress where we have raising consciousness in one side, and in the other one, we have the embodied forms that can hold that consciousness together. And the rungs of the ladder are projects that bring those things into being. And it is our hope to be creating those ways of embodiment for consciousness. So technology provides a space to embody those forms and bring higher consciousness into being. And you cannot have the consciousness of equality that is embodied in democracy or even run a democracy without the technology of writing. So the one thing that we use to coordinate on scale are language and currency, but language is embodied in a carrier. Either is sound, written words, beats, in digital spaces, but we're in a moment of time where new patterns and what we speak about is expressive capacities become available. And these expressive capacities give us a whole realm of new choices, just as DNA was there, and then a lot of choices and constant life keeps evolving and emerging. And what we say is that we must own our collective body, our carriers, and encode our nervous system in a way that creates more flow and life within our social organisms and for all living beings. And so to warm up our field and warm up our field for us all together, what I'm going to invite us all is to a bit of a conversation. Well, we get a little bit in touch with each other, a little bit with our emotion around data. Now we know we care about it, but what we're going to do is divide our groups in groups of 3. And we'll have 2 minutes to express each of us will have 2 minutes to express. Coordinate your own time, yes or her. After 6 minutes, we will come back to the room and we will hear a small sample of all our conversation. The intention is for you to listen to others and share with others. So, Robert, can you please write the question in the chat? I recommend that each of you copies the question so that one of you can paste it in the chat, because as we divide in breakout rooms, everyone will have their own chat. And here's the question. I'm actually going to just copy paste it in the chat. I think it's even easier. Let's see if I did it. Okay. So what emotions do you experience when you think about the current state of the internet? And who owns your data? And what do you do about it? You can share your current experience and where do emotions show up, like kind of identify where in your body they show up, and does that alter your behavior? So each of us will have 2 minutes. Coordinate your own time, and I'm gonna divide us all into groups of 3, and since we are 38 participants, When I'm so... We'll divide in 12 rooms, and some of them will have 4. So here we go. I'll see you all in about 6 minutes. You have to accept in order to go to a room. I have someone in one room. So for those that are staying here for some reason or another, okay. If you chose not to move to any room, hi Jane, you can share here. So everybody's in the room. And do you want to share about the questions? So we're a larger room, so not everybody went. So I see that some of the people in our team are still here. We have a couple of minutes. So Corina, would you want to share about what is your emotions that you experience when you think about the current state of the internet and who owns your data? I'm gonna unmute you. Okay, there you go. You're still muted. Let me unmute you. Give me a second. Okay, you unmuted yourself. Well, good.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. For the most part, I don't think about it because I use the internet every day for all sorts of wonderful things. But when I think about it, I do get pissed off. And I won't put, for instance, Facebook Messenger on my phone. And I kind of draw the line like, no, I'm not going to do that. You know, and so it will rise up in me like, this really sucks, or this sucks out loud. But there are so many ways that I love the internet that I keep working it, and I am doing lots and lots of stuff in the cloud. I have Gmail and I have my photos in, and I've learned how to just segue into all those places and rooms and mansions. So I get so much amazing stuff out of it that I often don't go to what is happening with our data.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you, and I hear you. Thank you very much. Hank, do you want to share? I'm thinking even maybe the people that stay here are half present with us. Joshua or Jane, anyone in this room that are listening that would want to share about the question?
I'm present. Could you just restate the question?
Yes.
One more time?
What emotions do you experience when you think about the state of the internet and who owns your data? What do you do about it, and where do your emotions show up with you?
Thank you. Well, my name is Joshua Tree, and it's a really deep, visceral experience. It feels really violating from the external. In a lot of ways, sitting the technological infrastructure at times can feel a little powerless. Yet inside of it, I'm really discovering the permissioning that I'm giving and the opportunity to really clarify my agreements. And it's become a deep sense of power and an opportunity to create really sacred layers of agreements that restore my power and transcend, and a new opportunity to connect to community in a really beautiful fashion.
Yes. Thank you. We did a poll with all our metacurrency community very recently, and this was a very consensus thing. I mean, from 2,500 people, 250 took the time to answer, and most of the answer gravitated around that sense of disempowerment and kind of, I can't do anything and I need this medium, but I don't feel comfortable. But then what's next? So thank you for sharing that with us today. Jane says she's a silent witness with us today. So thank you for being with us, listening. Anybody else? We have a couple of minutes before I bring everybody else into our main room. Okay, so I will be bringing everybody in about 30 seconds, and thank you very much for your answers. And what is that we're creating and where we're presenting today. And Joshua, you probably know this because you've been tracking us, is really an alternative to that. And it begins for us in with that same sense of disempowering, but also as a Trojan horse to scale. Like if we can own our own data, it's like we can have full economic engines for the wealth of all. So we're gonna be doing that, and I'm gonna bring everybody else back with us. And okay, the breakout rooms take a minute to close, but they start coming with us. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Suzanne, you're just joining us, right? Yeah, thank you. So everybody's in a breakout rooms. They're beginning to come into the main room. We just had a little conversation about what emotions do you experience when you think about the current state of the internet and who owns your data. And people are sharing their own experiences, and we'll be able to listen to some of these experiences in the context of the circle. Thank you, everyone, for joining the main room. We start to see everybody pop into the main room again. Yeah, everybody's back. Thank you. I hope you had a little small, nice conversation, starting to get a sense of each other. Yes. So we're going to take a couple of minutes to share in the circle what was our experience. We can share via chat or we can share via audio. We'll have about 5 to 7 minutes, depends on how our energy is rising, to have a sense of the whole. There's a lot of ground to cover. So if everyone wants to share a little bit of a aha moment, and again, you can also share via chat, and the reminder that the time belongs to all of us, so let's make good use of it. So let's jump in, and please, if you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand, or if you see the opportunity, just open your microphone and go for it. The floor is open. Thank you.
I can share, Ferananda, if you want. This is Meg Skelton, and one of the things that I get present to, and especially being in and around Holo and what we're building, is the degree at which really not much is private. Like we even my husband bought an Alexa in our house, and I'm like, it's a little freaky that we're being recorded all the time, and we're not even conscious of that, and we don't know what's happening with that data. So I know that's what's present for me, and then I know I go into a space of like, oh, it'll get worked out, or I'm not, I don't want to necessarily take out that thought process out really far. Like, what does this actually mean? It's a little freaky. And then I go move on to something else.
Thank you, Meg. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think our group, the overall kind of vibe was, we all used to love the internet, and we all used to find direct connection with people, and now we're kind of hesitant to, because like you say, there's all this stuff in the middle, all these people harvesting our data, and trying to sell us back stuff we don't need and selling our information to government agencies. So it's sort of like the internet that was doesn't really exist anymore, and it's been co-opted by corporate control. And now we're at this weird point in history where we get to reevaluate that and fix it, hopefully. Hopefully.
Thank you. We fix it or we create something new, right? Someone else?
You know, Ferananda, I think one of the keys that I'm a little surprised doesn't seem to get mentioned or much is productive capacities, and that the digital technologies and the network that basically facilitates the distribution of information, energy, those capacities have just not existed. Is there some problem in terms of navigating and kind of controlling and managing those technologies? Yes, certainly, but I tend to think that those potentials, generally speaking, are way, way underutilized. And I don't understand why people are I think that the key and the complexity is others. It's being able to effectively interrelate and collaborate and share. And as others I seem to be kind of touching upon, you know, there is the underlying integrity or trust of the respective parties to members, communities of practice. It tends to be key. A lot of talk, you know.
That's where we're going to address and see other possibilities. Thank you. Basically underutilized, and we're trying to go for it. Thank you, Brian. Anyone else? Mm-hmm. Okay, people just want to jump into it, so let's do it. So Emaline, just like take it from here and take us to the topic of what is the centralized web really does, and how decentralization and distribution can rise to more ethical tech, and also, you know, will be how this decentralized communication, law, production, power is going to start emerging. So we're starting to get into the topics on hand. So Emaline, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Fer. So as it seems like a lot of you guys are pretty well aware of at this point, you know, the commercialization of the web through software brought us all online pretty quickly. And while I'm sure we're conscious of the benefits from small-scale information sharing, we're aware also at this time that most of the benefit, right, has gone to companies whose servers actually sit in between the information that we share, right, or between users who are sharing information, right? And so for these companies, it's really the case that hosting data also means hoarding it, right, in order to create speculative markets, in order to sell data to the highest bidder, so that really we're profiled, and anyone can see those profiles so long as they have enough money to pay for access to those, right? So it can be governments, companies, whoever. And the progression of this model, right, has really, really involved users being treated as consumers rather than full participants, right, which is kind of like the original end-to-end vision of the web. And so centralized computing architecture is really what's made it possible for data capitalism to flourish. Because whatever entity, like I said, is sitting in the center, serving and hosting everyone's information, can also capitalize on it. So this has made it possible for data and really our collectively produced knowledge to sort of pass us by, almost. So for Google and Facebook, right, most of their profits are coming from ad revenue, whereas for Amazon, it comes from infrastructure and data analytics services. So it's the case now that the economic model of these like huge global behemoths is so successful because it appeals to the need of enterprises and companies, themselves included, to know us and to organize us and to coordinate us. So Google and Facebook want to sell our data so that other companies can shape our desires, and Amazon is joining this predictive game directly. And I think, as we've seen, trying to guess what we'll do next is actually a pretty powerful way of making sure that those things actually happen, right? I think of it as us being trapped in our bad habits, essentially. And for these companies, it's almost like a land grab for our psychical space. You know, it's like a mental land grab, and a competition in between them over who has access to things as intimate as our memory, right, and our desires. So, you know, what happens is that our interactions and behaviors get categorized on their terms for their motives. And this actually creates communities, right? But it creates top-down communities that give us no say about how data about us and about our lives, like our digital selves entirely, are used, right? And limits our ability to coordinate ourselves around the knowledge that we produce collectively. So in other words, it's the case that our social and economic relationships are severely asymmetrical right now, right? So as individuals, we're like intensively courted by companies who know much more about us than we do them, and who kind of disperse our digital selves into categories that are pooled towards ends that we don't choose, right? So we don't really have collective control over our collective knowledge, right? And it's exactly this sort of knowledge power asymmetry between us and the web giants that makes the freedom of association for purpose impossible. And again, for me, this is kind of what the purpose of the internet was to begin with. So just to emphasize again, right, what we do online is knowledge produced by the commons. And so to me, what ethical tech means is that the extraction and coordination of this knowledge should also be governed in common, right? Rather than extracted, actually, more often than not, to be used against its producers, right? That's sort of the financial structure of the current internet. So what we record, right, just to emphasize, is our collective memory, right? So how it's used and what purposes we want to put it toward is like really a question of our culture, right? As sort of web people, right? Okay, so if our memory and our consciousness comprise what we're currently able to see, this sort of brings us to solutions posed by current decentralized alternatives, right? So on the blockchain, which I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar with, right? The decentralized tech that's kind of all the rage now. Each node, right, holds all of the data, right? There's a centralized ledger. So that means that each node operates kind of as its own center. And I won't go into like a huge amount of technical critique or anything like that. But I will say that for me, current decentralized alternatives are kind of troublesome as solutions because it still retains what I think is the major pitfall of our current digital economy. And this pitfall is kind of a denial of point of view, right? Because if everyone holds a central ledger of everything that happens, instead of privileging kind of a unique perspective of each user and their point of view, you get instead everyone having kind of a view from nowhere, right? Like a collection of data that's taken as absolute truth for everyone, everywhere, at all times. And the reason why I said, it retains the pitfalls is because to me this mirrors kind of how data capitalism works by taking data out of context, right? And again, this is the move that allows it to become a commodity. So, the data is held, right, not by a central entity that holds it all and makes decisions about its flow, like on the centralized web, but by, like I said, every single node on the network, even if, and this is kind of the kicker for me, like even if they don't care about the particularity of the data, right? So, as a blockchain user, it's like, why should I have to preside over, right, and store people's transactions that I don't even know? So it's kind of like being forced to take responsibility for everything that happens, which actually doesn't increase freedom, it only increases responsibility. And so on technical terms, more responsibility means larger structural overhead for individuals, who then end up having to like compete with each other over who can garner the most infrastructural power independently, right? So there's competition over data processing without those competing really caring about the user data connection, which is just like on the centralized web, right? So for me, atomizing infrastructure in this way is also what creates the processing bottlenecks that actually make scaling of the blockchain impossible, right? And along with it, kind of our ability to use it for everyday sort of purposes. Okay, so now just to go back to those giant corporations, well, those are essentially just software, right? And there are different ways to think about software applications. So while blockchain tech thinks differently about applications, it still ends up concentrating power, not in the holding of the data, but in the holding of the infrastructure, right? So the big question on blockchain is like, who brings the most computing power, right? So this is why, to move toward truly ethical tech, we need both decentralized and distributed apps. So in distributed apps, each person holds not an unwieldy central ledger or a view from above in common, but their own interactions and communications, right? Hold apps rather than universal data, thus keeping data in the context in which it was generated and opting to understand it on the terms agreed upon within that context. So to take back our data, we need it to be fairly distributed and kept within the context that it's produced in, so it can actually be held by users for whom it comprises like a self-representation. So instead of this representation being used in ways that we don't know, it can be like a mirror for the user and actually become a helpful guide in making decisions about the future. So distributed apps can be an ecology of online spaces that really operate as a true commons. They're apps designed to distribute the power of not just ownership, right, but agency, management, and implementation across users. And they're called distributed apps because everyone who uses it holds a copy of the app's, we call it DNA sometimes, or like its constitution. As well as the data generated from opting into those rules in the first place. And so to me, it's like, if we hold this constitution, things can't just change over our heads, which means that we have the option for as much participation as we want in its ongoing management and its ongoing development, starting with opting in, right? So simply being willing to try out its coded rules just to see whether or not it works for our purposes. So just to finish up, that's what ethical tech is to me. It's agency related to both input, output, and the match between data and its generation and context. That's all I'll say about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Emaline. And there's some good conversations on the chat. Arthur Brock as well just joined us. And so welcome, Art. We are in the part of the presentation where Emaline has just shared a bit on decentralization and distributed architectures. And we are also, you probably can't see the chat, but there are some conversations around the chat. So we're going to keep moving with our presentation. And what I'm going to talk about right now is of some of the living systems principles that have been informing the design of Holo and Holochain. And it's not an exhaustive list of those. And actually, let me move you guys to this screen. I love how I can move you guys around the different screens. Okay. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's a list I wanted to present to you because it will start naming what are our intentions, how is the kind of the social fields we would want to create, what is the ethics behind it, what moves us to the core, and then we'll have the opportunity to go into the design of Holo and Holochain itself. So I'm going to share my screen again, and please do let me know if you don't see this, and this is one of the reasons I moved the screen here to see if that is possible. So let me, okay. Are you seeing this beautiful hummingbird?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay, so mutuality, and let me, again, 1 second, just to track my time. I like to be very precise because we have a lot of things to share, and I'm going to keep this one a little bit shorter than I meant because we're being, of course, our flow is different than the times we schedule for. And one of the first principles I want to talk about is mutuality and cooperation as we see it in every interdependent system, where fitness comes from contributing to the whole as well as getting your needs met. So we constantly say, and I get this from Art, he says, get mine and grow ours. And ours, we mean the commons, that which no one has created, like our natural resources, and that which everyone has created, like we're creating Wikipedia. What if we would have a different type of Wikipedia that would be distributed? How would that look like? What kind of mutuality and cooperation would it need? What kind of distributed governance would it take? And we, as well, in mutuality or cooperation, and we have here in the audience people that are already thinking about their own communities as networks that would have their own distributed ecosystem, their own distributed application ecosystem for their own members, to be able to be free agents, to be able to create their own membranes on how they want to interact, their agreements, their own laws, their rules of the game, and their own governance. So that's a wonderful principle of nature that we very much align with. Wait a second. Where is this? Where can I? Okay, diversity and uniqueness. So ecosystems thrive in diversity, and this is not because diversity is morally good. That really, like, ecosystems do thrive with diversity, but they also have very specific uniqueness and a high coordination of this uniqueness. So one of the things that we want to see is that we have different economic spaces and different ways of sharing applications, and that people can find what is the fit of their own fit within those applications. They have to choose where do they interact, where do they play. So, the acorn doesn't grow in the snow and the redwood doesn't grow in the sand. So you go and find the people and the applications where you're most able to thrive. And we are focusing very much on that because we want every individual to be a full citizen, both with rights and responsibilities. And these responsibilities are not an unreasonable burden, but they are something that people are accountable for. We want sovereign, accountable individuals that can together create the commons, and that we can actually be moving to democratization of power. So people powerful, not because they have to take power, but because they're powerful and they thrive within systems that allow it. And this is one of my favorite, and this is the third one I'll mention, which is one of the deep principles of metacurrency, which is deep wealth. We say deep wealth is not tradable. And as you can read this, we say wealth, there's a very specific well-building pattern in the hearts of nature economic system that is key for its success. So it's like, saying that wealth is money is like saying that bees are about honey. And we know that these little guys, they work so hard and they're responsible for the whole food system. It's incredible, the wealth that they create. And is, in these terms, wealth is a health pattern of our collective. And for us, and those that have been following a metacurrency for a while, currency is actual currency. It's a way to make visible, to enable, and to shape a flow. And as Art shares about cryptocurrencies, give some of your attention to what kind of flows do certain cryptocurrencies enable. And in our distinction, currencies are way more than just tradable wealth or products or services. And we know this. We have how reputation currencies are part of very large amount and constellation of different types of currencies, because we can have wealth that is measurable, or wealth that is tradable, or wealth that is just acknowledgeable, like my deep friendship with many of you, or love that we hold for each other. So that is our levels of, a little bit of insight into our levels of wealth and how we define currency. That's definitely for another session. But I did wanted to present that as one of the things that makes us be super inspired on living systems, because as well, Holochain and Holo are creating. We don't say, oh, we're inspired by it. No, we create based on it, and there's deep thinking and that is going through all our systems, so that we can truly create life and not destruction and death. So with this, I will give the floor again to Emaline to start sharing the solution, that of the hosting of Holo and Holochain, so that we can get deeper and deeper into our conversation. And Emaline, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Great. So now is the time where I get to bring everyone up to speed on what the Holo and Holochain team has been doing to kind of move us toward greater autonomy in our digital lives. And so Holochain is already built. It's currently in alpha, and it's our free open source architecture for running the distributed apps that can scale. So essentially that means that it provides the right environment for the kinds of applications that I talked about earlier. So Holochain applications fit a bunch of different coordination purposes. Just to name a few, you can do things like community resource management, supply chain management. You can make a platform co-op or sharing economy type apps, social media apps and other social networks, and really any kind of organizational or collaborative or governance tools. Which is really what's needed right now, right? So that people can come together to coordinate without relying on third parties, right? So we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So each application that you could potentially create runs on its own holochain that's fit for specific purposes and fit for particular social contexts. And on Holochain, the users are also hosts. So the more people using apps means greater storage and processing capacity, right, for everyone. So Holochain really builds up a web with greater user autonomy, and this is built directly into its architecture. and into its protocols. So, so to give a totally non-technical explanation, it's really just a system that allows users to own their data, to control their digital identities, to choose how they connect with applications, and to choose with whom they share data. And it does this while also providing for automatic backups and customization of user experience that's actually done right by the user, not by a company predicting your behavior as a user. And Holochain is entirely peer-to-peer. And so data is sharded across a network of full peers. And this means that Holochain uses a DHT, so a distributed hash table, which is how it enforces validation rules on data published from a user's own individual signed source chain. So this is to say that each agent holds their own immutable hash chain and backs up a sample of the application that it comes from, that public data, as a node in the DHT. So this makes powerful and secure decentralized computing possible, even on really lightweight devices, right, like mobile phones. So the DNA of a Holochain app comprises the first entry on an agent's source chain. And these rules set validation requirements, ensuring that the application runs securely. So data can't be counterfeited or lost or tampered with. And an app's validating hash table, distributed hash table, randomizes redundancy of public data across nodes in the shared space. So, you know, if a node goes offline, the DHT continues to maintain the data that the app needs to perform and to do its thing. And if someone changes the app's rules, that's essentially just like a fork. Like they take themselves out of that community and it creates an entirely new application. So this is why we talk about Holochain as being agent-centric. And so it actually mirrors the structure of a person in communities, or kind of bouncing along many different communities, depending on what they're doing. So I mentioned earlier that even though blockchain decentralizes the holding of data, it sort of inadvertently centralizes infrastructure, right, by leaving it open to pure competition. And so the approach of Holochain avoids centralized servers as well as centralized ledgers. And with none of this centralization, it's possible to maintain data integrity across a ton of peers without processing delays and without wasted computational energy, right? Because that's kind of what it takes to hold things centrally. So that's a good bit about Holochain. But what we're working on right now, what the team's doing currently, is rolling out Holo. And Holo is the first really large-scale application built on Holochain to enable hosting of distributed apps so that they can actually move from really particular tech spaces, right, the crypto world, out into the mainstream. And so the goal of Holo is to have distributed applications really work, which requires this mainstream participation. So Holo takes hosting of major types of social apps out of centralized data centers and back onto our devices. So again, moving from centralized holdings to holdings that are scattered across the peripheries. And this is a really good thing because doing peer-to-peer hosting creates like an infrastructure that scales itself and that balances and shares the load across tons and tons, even like millions of peers. And so the question that I've gotten kind of explaining this stuff is like, well, why do you have to create a hosting ecosystem if the apps are already distributed, right? Because doesn't distributed apps mean that everyone is already holding their own data? Which is true, but the thing is that we're pushing for mainstream adoption, right? Because that's a super duper important part of creating, right, robust networks. And so we think that in the beginning, there will be a lot of folks who just want to try out particular distributed applications from their browsers, right? Before they're really sure that they want to be a full part of the community that these apps create. So you could think of users who are not hosts in the Holochain world as visitors, right? Or even kind of like people seeking shelter from the storm, right? If you think back to the huge problems with the current web that I described, right? So yeah, so okay. So Holo essentially is, I think about it as kind of a pragmatic compromise so that people can transition with more ease to the benefits that decentralization affords, right? To more autonomy, really. So Holo allows hosts to share their bandwidth and storage and processing power to host, right, these visitors' data. And so again, if we want mainstream users involved and informed, it would be really nice, we thought, to have them be able to access Holochain applications through web browsers, right? And by using existing payment systems to interact with these decentralized apps, right? Until they're ready to become full peers on Holochain. So what we're doing really with Holo is applying sharing economy principles of letting other people use your storage and your processing capacity, right? And this is really how all Holochain apps work, right? Through sharding and through distributed hash tables. But on Holo, hosts are providing even more spare storage and processing for new users who don't yet bring any resources to the network. And our little catchphrase, essentially, has been that we're trying to make the crowd the cloud. So it's not the total digital freedom, right? The little paradise where everyone is both a user and a host. But the idea is to be really, really sober about what it takes to set this shift in motion. So if you think back to what I said about the hosting giants of the centralized web, it's pretty clear that just having a robust ecosystem of hosts can kind of ensure that, you know, it's not a few companies having a monopoly on the data that's produced by all of us, right? So we want to be able to have tons of people hosting and to facilitate the transition to participatory, democratically governed ecosystems, and to fulfill on this possibility of apps being more like communities of practice and knowledge, like we've been talking about. And so the cool thing about hosting in this way, and kind of helping a freer web come about, is that we actually have the opportunity to serve the apps that we really, really want to see in the world, right? By setting hosting prices and priorities. So say you wanted to make sure a reliable distributed wiki comes about, for example, you could set hosting parameters to make sure that it's always available, right? Because as it stands, Wikipedia has to ask for like a ton of donations, right? And most other really popular apps and services have funding structures, right, that make necessary all the things we've discussed we really don't like about our digital experiences at present. So I mentioned hosting prices earlier, kind of to hint at the fact that this is not unpaid activism, like I'm sure a lot of us here are used to. And hosting on Holo is actually gains you recognition by a cryptocurrency, which institutionalizes and thus it transparently acknowledges the responsibility of providing infrastructure that comes with hosting as Holochain grows in popularity, right? So hosts can be paid either by the person using the application or by the provider of the application, depending on how the app is set up. So in order to give you some more information about the cryptocurrency engine on Holochain, which is Holo, I'll turn it over to Arthur Roth, who will explain that structure a little bit better.
Hello. I was in the middle of typing an answer to somebody's question, though. I guess it's hard to check in with everyone when it's hard for me to get a vibe on what's going on with so many people. So the Holo cryptocurrency, let me just say a couple things about it. First of all, unlike Bitcoin, blockchain, Ethereum, that kind of stuff where the currency is built in to the underlying infrastructure, that underlying infrastructure is called Holochain, and it doesn't have a currency on purpose. For us, it's like the internet protocol shouldn't have a currency built in, right? This is the part that needs to be public domain so that you can run different currencies on top of it, or you can run different applications on top of it. The currency that we're introducing is for an app that we're running on top of it, Holo, which Emaline and Fair have been talking about, which basically extends virtual Holochain space to people who aren't running Holochain, and then you get paid for doing that. And what we're doing, we're doing a lot of things different about cryptocurrency. First of all, we think that cryptocurrency can be a lot more, like currency can be a lot more than just gambling chips, than just tokens that you speculate on and they go crazy up and down and that kind of thing. That you can actually design currencies for value stability by having them be redeemable, backed by assets. And Holo is backed by the asset of computing power of the Holochain network, of everybody running Holo, so that that's not that's not an asset which is fluctuating a lot, right? That grows or that shrinks or expands in a more stable pattern, so that the currency can be more stable, and it can be something that isn't just about gambling, but could have the potential of even running a more stable crypto economy on. It also isn't a token. It's not a coin that has like its own independent data existence. It's actually crypto accounting between players, between partners, between accounts or agents. And so the whole issue of supply works differently, because you're not creating coins from magic out of thin air, out of nothing. What's happening is people are extending each other credit when they meet certain qualifications, and what those qualifications have to do with is providing the asset that backs the currency. So it grows the computing power that backs the currency. One of the things, so Fair, do you want me to actually do the Prezi real quick, or? Yeah, you do? Okay.
Yes, and you don't have to do it real quick. We're in good timing.
Okay.
I think that people here are very keen to listen to cryptocurrencies, and I think it's very, very important, as we have felt for many years, that we need to kind of move people from the Bitcoin mindset into something broader.
Okay. I am ready to share my screen. Guess I'm gonna have to close the chat. Can everybody see actually, wait, let me.
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So this is just a little thing. Well, no, let's say it's not a little thing. Cryptocurrencies, it seems that many people think cryptocurrencies are going to solve a bunch of problems that our national currencies fail to solve. It seems like magically, if we take the government out of the middle, that everything's going to work different. It's hard for me to really imagine a currency design that more faithfully reproduces the problems of national currencies than Bitcoin, in terms of the artificial scarcity and the consumption of resources, and it's already more centralized than national currencies in terms of the mining pools that control 94% of the currency. So what was supposed to actually be a new pattern has really become the old pattern already in just a matter of a few years. And so I think what's part of what's missing is that many people in the crypto space, in the cryptocurrency space, they understand computers, but they don't understand currencies necessarily. And I kind of wish that they had the opportunity to hang out with kind of like alternative currency geeks that could talk about some of the different ways that you can change the patterns of flow and behavior in currencies. And so this is actually just, I'm hoping to crack that open just a little bit here, what some of that playground looks like. So for one thing, there's Fair already mentioned that we use the word currency different than most people, that we talk about currencies like current see, the ability to see currents or flows. And what helps you see these currents or flows are the tokens that may be flowing, tokens that are markers of these flows. And the level that we're used to thinking of these tokens, that we actually use these tokens, that we use dollars or Bitcoin and that kind of stuff, is at the level of transaction. So we understand the rules of transaction, and this is most of our whole vantage point on currencies is really from this one place. What we don't really think about as much is issuance. Where do these tokens come from? How do they come into being? I mean, this is the kind of thing that blockchain people get angry at me for, but the crypto people have popularized calling national currencies fiat currencies, as if blockchain currencies aren't also created from nothing, which is what fiat actually means, to speak into being. And even though the blockchain currencies are also created by fiat, we randomize who gets to do that by proof of work or proof of stake, and a different person gets to create it instead of the government or a bank. But it's still being created from nothing. And there's other options for issuance, for who gets to issue and how, and all of that kind of thing, and how to manage supplies as well. There's also the interplay with other currencies, interactions, interfacing with other currencies, and the kind of retirement and redemption, the end of a life cycle. So there's actually a life cycle that these things move through, that all currencies move through. And when I say currencies, I mean bus passes and movie tickets and postage stamps and like all of these things that we don't necessarily think of as currencies, college degrees, 5-star ratings, your eBay rating, those kinds of things. There's ways that the votes are issued. There's rules about transaction. If it's a good reputation currency, one of the rules should be that you can't transact it. We can't trade college degrees, right? That's a bad idea. But the college degree may interplay with other currencies. It may get me into an advanced degree program, or my high school degree may have helped get me into the college. There's ways that they interplay. And then there's redemption and retirement. Like if you've plagiarized, you can have your degree stripped of you, right? The people who issue it can take it away in that case. So there's rules about all those phases of all of these currencies, but we don't tend to recognize all of these things as currencies. And there's real power that happens when we start recognizing that. But I'll say more about that later, because there's another level of the system that we don't pay much attention to. And it's not just the tokens that are flowing, but the way that the system that holds those tokens works. So it starts from somebody conceiving it and designing it and building it, and then launching and helping it gain adoption, tuning, evaluating, getting feedback, redesigning, maybe rebuilding. There's like this cycle that may be happening. And all of that kind of revolves around a core vision for what role the currency, or what purpose the currency serves. And if you're being responsible, you should also have a plan for the wind down and closing of the currencies, because all currencies do come to an end. And it's nice to know that. I know some people out there would like to think that these cryptocurrencies will never end, but they will. They all do. Everything does, and they should. We should move on. We should evolve. And so one of the interesting things about this, though, is that systems don't run themselves. You know, I think it's really interesting that we've put these things out there. We've put cryptocurrencies out there that have distributed or decentralized issuance and accounting, and we claim that it's a decentralized currency, even though there's no decentralized method of governance attached. So then we have sort of this chaos of power plays between miners and software developers and that kind of stuff, because systems don't run themselves. They actually need to be governed by the people who created them, or the people who are using them. And the real power in a currency actually happens at this level of system governance, not at the level of tokens, because you can change the rules about all the tokens. And when all we see are the transaction patterns of tokens, and we don't even see the higher level of the system interplay, then we actually miss like where the puppet strings are on the system. So this is kind of an important curtain to kind of peel away so that we can see all these things. The other thing is that there's a lot of possible decisions to make in currency design. Most people are only looking at, like, maybe even most alternative currency people that are not just crypto people are only looking at a handful of decisions in this whole decision tree that is I've organized by the token life cycle and the currency life cycle. So there's all these patterns of issuance that are possible, and patterns of accounting and tracking, and this is where some of the cryptocurrency and digital signing and all that kind of stuff comes into play. And there's patterns of formalization, like, are you even going to use numbers, or are you going to use names, or are you going to use whole numbers? You can formalize things in different ways, rankings and all of that kind of stuff, but we don't think about that. We tend to just think in terms of rational divisible parts like money. And there's this way in which money kind of occupies so much of our imagination of what's possible that we miss the range of expression that's possible in currencies. And so the impact of this is that blockchain actually could be so much more about tokens, so much more than about tokens. Like, what's happened is it's kind of like blockchain was released with its first app being Bitcoin, a thing that makes coins, digital coins or tokens. And it's kind of not graduated much beyond that, even with like Ethereum tackling, trying to build a global computer and build distributed apps and that kind of stuff. It seems that the killer app for blockchain is tokenization, is building tokens. And so now everybody is like looking through this lens of tokenization and looking at, how do I tokenize the world? And unfortunately, tokenizing the world has a tendency to break things, because tokens, digital fungible tokens, one is equal to another no matter what setting it's in. And that just isn't the case. People are not just equal to another. You can't just plug them in and change them. A pound of beef is not just equal to another pound of beef when this one's in a living cow. You know what I mean? Like, that breaks the cow. It breaks patterns when you try to treat everything like it's just fungible, replaceable tokens, and you put that lens on and try to interact with the whole world that way. You actually start breaking patterns of wealth in community, of relationship, of, these kinds of things. And it's not just tokens. In fact, it's not just money. This is this current C type of example that we're talking about. And so this is the example I started giving. A college degree is a kind of reputation currency that makes it visible that you've attained a certain level of learning in a particular domain. And you earn the degree by fulfilling the degree requirements. You need 25 credits of this and 15 of that and 10 of this. And those show how much hours of coursework you've completed in different domains. But the credits only count if you get a good enough grade. which is a performance metric trying to measure how well you're learning the content of the course. And you divide up the power in the university by who gets to issue which currency. And then students manage their flow. They navigate the path of education through these currencies. These three non-monetary currencies are woven together to shape the flow of learning. And again, we don't think about currencies this way. We don't realize how much currencies are the social DNA of the world that we of the water that we swim in, and how much they shape our behavior, and how much we use them to solve flow problems that are not just monetary. And then transcripts are like your balance sheet of this education. And if you start looking at systems with intrinsic data integrity, blockchain, holochain, those kinds of things, those no longer need to be hidden in a data fortress of the registrar's department in the college. They could actually be published in a public way, and you could retrieve your transcript and share it and that kind of thing, or a semi-public way where you get to release it. I wonder what's going to show up here. Okay, so yeah, I was just saying, remember, one of the valid rules for transactions is that you can't do them, and you shouldn't do them for reputation currencies. I think that's actually the end of this particular presentation, but I just want to say that there's so many fun things that you can do to shape little dynamics in currency design, and that give feedback loops and give wisdom and information, and sort of upgrade the collective intelligence of community by helping us see the flows. And those flows are about so much more than exchange of goods and services. There's flows of sharing and caring and trust and relationship, and all kinds of social contracts that, even as we move beyond some of the patterns in monetary currencies, we still, in order to operate community on scale, need to be able to see these currents. We need currencies to be able to make visible some of these reputational dimensions and social contracts. Does that fulfill your desire for this section, Ferananda?
Ask them.
Okay.
We kind of jumped over one of their Q&As, so I'm wanting to open the space right now for any questions. We're really here to serve you and to listen to you, and to be able to provide the most answers we can. And if we have some time, I would want to invite some of the people we have present in the room to share some of their initiatives that are taking on these decentralized and distributed architectures. So please, the floor is open for any questions.
Arthur, can you talk a little bit about why and how you designed Holo and the currency a little bit more, based on now kind of looking at all of that, and then go back in?
Sure. So Holo is a mutual credit currency, which technically means the number of credits that exist is always zero. So it's a very stable supply because the number never changes. But the active supply changes by allowing some accounts to go negative that allows other accounts to go positive. Since it's always transacted through double entry accounting type of thing plus a cryptographic signature, it allows the currency supply to actually breathe, to expand and contract. And the places where credit limits are enabled is for parts of the ecosystem that are providing the asset which backs the currency. So for example, these Holo boxes that we're selling starting next week in a crowdfunding campaign is, if you're running a Holo box or you're running Holo on a different type of computer, on a server or something like that, you can earn hosting credits. And as you gain a track record for earning hosting credits, you start getting a credit limit that is extended to you because you've basically shown that you'll be able to earn back that debt. you'll be able to provide that value back to the ecosystem to be able to pay it back. And so that's one of the places, one of the examples of where the supply can expand or contract a little, but it's a little bit, it's a little more fluid than a fiat method of issuing, 25 coins with each transaction block or something like that, because not everybody uses their whole credit limit, right? It allows, I think of it, I actually use this metaphor to think about it, where it's kind of like you're building a bridge, and the reserve accounts in Holo, which is a place that people can actually buy into Holo credits with euros or dollars or Bitcoin or ETH. I think of them as kind of like the big stanchions holding up the bridge, and think of the infrastructure provider as kind of the construction crew that's building the bridgeway, and that the hosting accounts are like the expansion joints that just allow flexibility, so that you don't have this rigidity, which it allows supply to come into being in small quantities where it's needed. And that kind of thing is really vital if what you're trying to do is to build something that has value stability. And you would ask, why would you want to do that when most people are going into the crypto space because they want to gamble, they want to speculate, they're hoping that they buy something cheap and then it goes all hockey stick and goes 1,000 times more, 10,000 times more. Well, the problem is that those things that go 10,000 times more also tend to go 10,000 times less. And for mere mortals that don't have a lot of extra money to gamble with, or if you're trying to create a business and consider accepting cryptocurrency, and actually have to pay your rent or your employees or those kinds of things with the income, it's hard to build a stable business model on something that's all going up and down and unpredictable, and you don't know if the bottom's going to fall out next week. And part of what we would like to do with Holo as an initial fabric is build a foundation for crypto economies that are based on real human needs: food and energy and housing and transportation, and in this case, computing, because computing power can run the infrastructure for the currencies that provide all those other things. So we think that provides a whole different foundation and dynamics for cryptocurrency that's different than just the gambling.
So we have a couple of raised hands, and prior to the raised hands, we have a question from James Diger, and he says, "One thing I'd like to know is how much Holo fuel can I earn being a box buying host, over what timeline, and could I possibly make a living by being a Holochain DApp host?"
You're wanting me to answer this question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so first of all, I want to give all the legal disclaimers that we have no idea. This is going to be market-based, meaning hosts get to set their own prices, and so there's going to be moving markets on this kind of stuff. What I can say is that we intend to sell Holo credits initially at 10,000 times cheaper than it costs to do computing on Ethereum. So in other words, if you look at what it would cost to do the computing on Ethereum, how much gas it would cost in Ether in gas costs, and then we basically will give you 10,000 times the computing power for what you would have had to pay to do it on Ethereum. And that may sound like a lot. It may sound outrageous. And it kind of is, until people actually understand the architecture, and that we will probably be moving that we'll probably be actually able, the market will probably actually be able to provide that computing power for more like 1 million times cheaper, maybe 10 million or 100 million times cheaper. And so very quickly what's going to happen is that the price for the actual hosting, like if you start off hosting at the price that I was just talking about, and if you had a full hosting load, my estimates show that you would basically pay for your Holo box twice over every day, which is, needless to say, probably too expensive a hosting rate for people to really pay those kinds of hosting prices. So there's going to be a natural drive as people sort of compete for the traffic, because there's probably going to be more hosting supply than hosting demand initially. People are going to drive the price down a little bit to compete for that demand. And very quickly, that means the value of the currency goes up in terms of its buying power, because the price of what it's buying is going down. You can buy more of it for the same amount. And then it will start to stabilize as the price starts to stabilize. So the idea will be you certainly can operate at a profit, and especially I think early in the cycle. But I think eventually, if we tell the truth about what the design of Holo is for, is it's really for making distributed computing cheap and available to everyone, so that we can do other activities of coordinating with better intelligence on the planet.
So we take a breath. It's a lot of information to process, and Arju wants to say something else, and then I'll give the floor to Mr. Breitbart. No? Good. You're on, Doug.
Okay. So I'll confess to you, like, what you're presenting residing at the extreme end of my cognitive event horizon. I'm going to qualify first with that, because I'm not a currency geek. And I have a complete, dilettante polymath tech proficiency and understanding. So it's wide, but very shallow. So with that qualification, my sense and understanding of Holo as sort of a first app that maps to a mechanism for surfacing flows of computing power, processing, got that. Now, I and a partner are envisioning the platform of the future for how people work and play together, but through a human being-centered lens. So it's not about tech and tools, and it's not about data. It's about human generativity. And so we look at data as a byproduct of that process, not as an intrinsic valuable thing unto itself. It's only valuable when contextualized. In the scheme of that, the other shoe for me is storage, right? And with a potentially much greater exponential growth in storage as a value relative to processing. And could the same principles of Holo, or the application of Holo to processing, could Holo also be applied to storage as a resource, as an underlying asset base? Or does it require its own app? Is it not Holo, it's something else? Because of the nature of the asset base itself, as exponential data generation happens over the network. And the reason this is not academic for me is because your interview with Tammy, which was the first time I actually grasped what you guys have been doing, because I've been following Ferananda for several years, and I have never been able to get the rubber to meet the road until that conversation. But it clicked. What it also did was it sort of blew out all of my previous architecture, vision or architecture, which reflexively went to centralized structures. Not relational databases, but document database. It still ultimately had these, you know, like nuggets of aggregation, you know, consolidation, concentration. That means we're back in the industrial, we're back in the old model. So to truly be free, everything has to be distributed, which means storage has to be distributed. And the people generating it may not have the capacity to provide that resource to themselves.
Can I just jump in?
Okay, and I'll stop. I didn't mean to run, but that's my big $1 million question.
Well, to me, you started off with this really sort of interesting social dynamic thing, and then we went to storage, and the answer to the storage one is actually really easy. Is to us, storage doesn't seem like the hard problem. What seems like the hard problem is coordination, is processing, is rules, is making sure that we're all following a set of agreements when we're interacting in things. Applications, distributed computing is much more difficult than distributed storage. There's tons of projects out there doing distributed storage, and we don't talk about that much because we're actually really trying to distinguish ourselves from them. So we're not Filecoin or Storage or MadeSafe, or there's a whole bunch of projects out there doing distributed storage. We don't talk about storage much because that part looks easy to us. So so yes, you will be able to store things in Holo apps. We actually haven't. I mean, you can already store data in Holo apps. That's how they work. They store in the DHT, which is a shared space for that. We don't have file storage per se. We've considered even binding with IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, which we used some of their communication protocols in hoping to actually be bound with them, compatible with them. But we may end up actually just making our own kind of storage apps on top of Holochain, because it's actually not that hard a problem for us to solve. So, and now I want to lead that back to the first question you were talking about in terms of the social coherence and in terms of the human dynamics. I mean, part of why Holochain is built the way it is, and we haven't said this part yet, so maybe nobody knows this, is in blockchain, everything runs in one big monolithic global ledger, right? So all these Ethereum smart contracts and distributed apps actually run on one Ethereum blockchain, which is now over 400 gigabytes. It's almost a half a terabyte large, and it's growing fast. That's not the way Holochain works. In Holochain, every Holochain application is its own Holochain. And when we say Holochain, Holochain is called this because it's holographic, meaning like if you cut a holograph or hologram in half, you don't have two half images. You have two pictures of the same image that are from a slightly different angle. If you keep cutting it in half, you sort of lose some resolution, but you still have kind of a representation of the whole. That's the way the sharding of our distributed hash table works. So that anyway, and the whole has to do with the source chains of every individual married to the sharing space of the distributed hash table. And so the rules for data integrity in that space are determined by the application. And so the reason that we do this is that I actually think that governance at the Ethereum level is kind of impossible. Right? You have people using it for different purposes. You have miners just trying to make money. You have traders just trying to speculate coins. You have app builders trying to actually run distributed apps or companies. You have people trying to embed smart contracts that want it cheap to be able to store things. You have all of these different agendas of people trying to use it differently. And they can't govern themselves at the level of social coherence where they're trying to actually do something. And because every application is a separate holochain, then it allows you to create a community and a community of agreements. So you can evolve those agreements and say, now we're going to share in these ways. Now we're going to add these new protocols and communicate in these ways, and we're going to whatever, right? And you actually can then evolve your application per the agreements of the group and deal with the human dynamics at a human level instead of at the level of every friggin' application trying to use the shared space.
I think Doug liked that idea. Okay, so I'm going to go into Alexander's question, and is, if you can buy holo credits with dollars, where will the dollars go? Or ask another way, how can the credits that have been created that way be extinguished? Or did you call it terminated?
So for the life cycle of tokens, I was calling it retired, being retired or expired or redeemed. And if you can buy holo in dollars, which the intention is that you can buy it in dollars, euro, potentially Bitcoin or Ethereum, or Ether. What happens is we have a special kind of an account called reserve accounts. When I was talking about the bridge analogy, I was saying those are like the stanchions, the uprights, and so what happens is if you buy holo credits in dollars, those dollars go into a reserve account and they sit outside the holo system on reserve. And reserve accounts have a special credit limit rule that when they have a proof of reserve, a proof of deposit, essentially, their credit limit expands equal to the value of that deposit so that they can transfer the credits to the person who just bought them. And so they're going into debt inside the holo system equal to the amount that they have on reserve outside of the holo system. Does that make sense? The two parts there balance out. And then the people who provide hosting services, which is the asset backing the currency, have the ability to redeem credits that they earn back for those other currencies. You can't. It's not not a general exchange, so you can't just like say, well, somebody just bought this bicycle from me for a 1,000 holo credits, and I'm going to cash them out now. It's actually only for running the assets that run the infrastructure. And so you can buy hosting credits, and then the people who provided the hosting can redeem them. And so the dollars sit there on reserve until somebody comes and redeems them. That's the short answer. There's more details I can go into, but I hope that made it clear.
And we have a question on...
Wait, one little thing. So when the credit limit gets extended in the negative, that was the issuance of holo credits. When somebody comes and redeems them and those get extinguished, they go away and the dollars go away. That was the retiring, the redeeming of the credits. That just want to make sure that life cycle was complete. When you're paying up a negative balance, those credits are going away. That supply just disappeared.
So there's other questions for the currency in itself. So I'm a little bit divided on what to bring next. Just like a small clarification that just came is there two different types, cash redeemable holos and non-cash redeemable?
Nope, there's one type of credit, but because they're not coins, they're not an abstract coin. We can actually, the way that you manage the data integrity is in an account or an agent-centric system is that when we do a transaction, my app audits your chain to figure out your current state, your balance. Your app audits my chain to figure out my state, to make sure that we're both good to do the transaction we're about to do. So we have the capacity to actually audit somebody's chain and see what hosting they provided with their proof of service invoices for hosting, And those are the only things, only your proof of service invoices for hosting are the things that can be redeemed out for Holo. So we don't need it to be a different type of currency. Though a host could also use it to sell their bike or their car or to do babysitting or whatever. But payments that come for babysitting or bikes or cars are not redeemable. Only payments for hosting, which are accounted for in the Holo proof of service system, are the ones that are redeemable.
And to keep clarifying and moving into the design, there's another question that's creating new units of credit by allowing negative balances, debt, implies a mechanism to redeem that debt in case the indebted party fails. Is the concept of smart contract insurance in place to mitigate this?
I can actually clarify that question a little bit, perhaps.
Go ahead, Perry.
You've answered a lot of it, and in the concept of the reserve accounts and how you bring units of credit into being by having positive cash balances and being able to create negative entries that have corresponding positive entries. Is there a reason that you didn't extend that to all of the creation of credit in the system? Like, maybe I'll just leave it at that.
The short answer is because we want wealth to be generated from the system's internal capacity, not only from external currencies. So yes, the reserve accounts are part of what elevates the bridge as well, right? That's on top of currencies that people already agree are valuable and that kind of stuff. But people also, hopefully, if they're using the services, also agree that the computing power is valuable, that the infrastructure is valuable, that the ability to communicate and coordinate on a massive scale is valuable, the ability to take our data back from Facebook and run these things in a peer-to-peer manner, like that those kinds of things are valuable. And so if this rests only on the outside currencies, like national currencies, which have their limitations, and these crypto gambling chips, which have their limitations, then the system never really starts generating its own wealth. And so the ability to have credit limits that can expand based on the asset production capacities is the way that it starts generating its own value. But it's also interfacing with the outside value.
Yeah, it's ingenious. I've spent an inordinate number of years thinking about value stable currencies, and it's very refreshing to finally talk to a group that actually realizes how incredibly important that concept is. Is there going to be a market for people that do come by Holo through other means to redeem them? Like, is there just a cash? If I wanted to buy some from somebody, is there going to be a market app, a D app in the system that allows me to just exchange cash for Holo and vice versa?
I'm assuming, and we're actually probably going to make some relationships on purpose with some outside exchanges, but any exchange that wants to create an account in Holo would have their internal account and can exchange credits that are in that internal account for outside things. So we can't, just like we can't stop you from using Holo to sell your bike or something like that. You can use your Holo credits to buy dollars from somebody or buy, right? So exchanges would be able to operate. I think it's going to take a little while for exchanges to shift in thinking from only coins to crypto accounting. And so we'll see which ones get on quicker than others.
Thank you.
One quick thing, Mark Spakowski brought up ICO, referring to initial coin offering. And yeah, in our case, it's actually initial community offering. It's the time in which we're opening the currency up to the community.
Okay, we go with Sam's question, please. We have 5 minutes and I need some 2 minutes to close, so go ahead, Sam.
Okay, cool. Here's my voice, by the way. I'm really quite sick. So I wanted to sort of ask about this idea of what are referred to as mutual coordination systems, which the value flows and open value network stuff that I've been idly chatting about in my chat is kind of the best example that I've seen of a grammar and an ontology that makes that possible. And you know, my background's been in all the cryptocurrency space. I previously did supply chain tracking stuff at a company called Everledger using Hyperledger. Now I'm doing a consensus on the Ethereum blockchain, and my reason for that is that you've got kind of, you know, in blockchains, you've got your base sort of financial layer of, you know, transactions, money, coins, tokens, whatever. And now there's this big push to just track everything in the world. So we're going to end up with supply chains sort of grammars in there that do assets and products and, you know, events that mutate them and that kind of thing. And the OVN stuff is kind of a higher order grammar that sits above all of that, which can unify all those concepts into sort of a more generic form of value, which means that products and shares and money and, you know, all the kinds of value that we're talking about more broadly can all be treated the same way and interacted with in, you know, a fluid sense. And to me, that seems to be, I guess the reason I'm doing all this is that in order for mutual coordination to work outside of a very small, isolated network of people, you need that visibility of, you know, where is everything in the world? Like, it's no good, you know, being able to, that you've got some spare eggs you need to get rid of unless someone else can see your spare eggs. And so my curiosity with Scepter and Holochain is, how do you architecturally build those kinds of systems? What does it look like to be able to kind of, you know, fractally have visibility over things all across the network in that way? And is that kind of possible with the architecture?
So one quick thing about the open value network and flows system and that kind of thing, it feels like is really on the right track, especially with even the name. They've named it focused on flows, and yet the ontology is still kind of object centric. It's based on a resource, as if you know in advance what a resource is, when part of the genius of value creation is turning things that you didn't know were a resource into a resource, or not even things, but like the act of being able to filter things or to go find things or to, you know, to, like, there's value creation isn't something that sits in an object, which makes the answer to your second part of your thing you were talking about in terms of how can you see these things even more complicated, even more sophisticated. And I know you've been tracking some stuff around us for a while, and so you've looked at Scepter. Now Scepter is kind of like harder to find. We're kind of focusing on Holochain at the moment and downplaying Scepter because it's too confusing for people. But part of the whole reason that in Scepter that we have the low-level semantics and the self-describing protocols is to create that kind of universal data flow capacity. So we've built a universal parser in Scepter that lets us parse any protocol that can be expressed in that frame because of the low-level semantics. And we have this beautiful Prezi that's an old one, but it has this YouTube video of a aquarium screensaver. That's this like really beautiful aquarium screensaver. And it's this example that we use for what we call holoptonets, the ability to see the whole of value and flows in a network, where you can literally see millions of dimensions of variability at once. Right? The human perceptual system is not designed for words and numbers. It's designed for nature. And so when you can see numbers of different types of fish swimming, or swimming at different speeds, or swimming higher or lower, bubbles in the tank, currents, algae growing on the sides, cloudiness of the water, the light, the plants, the little piles of rocks of different colors, like you can literally put so many things, millions of dimensions of variability on the screen at once, and be able to see patterns and be able to see surpluses and be able to see movement of things. And that's what we hope Scepter enables, that scale collective intelligence in our communities. So you can see idle assets sitting someplace when you've wired your display to be connected for those kinds of flows. And hopefully we even have collective processes of making those correlations as well. But that kind of interface is, I think, the kind of thing that you need for that holistic gestalt that you're talking about, needing, you know, to be able to see more than we can like file informationally in our brain.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's take a deep breath together. It's closing time of all that is coming, of all that is possible. This is the fruits of many, many, many years of work, of many, many, many wonderful people. And we invite you to come with us in this journey. It's the beginning of our journey. It's both exciting and a little bit scary for for all of us. We are in this moment where it is the moment for the feedback of our community to see if this vision is actually going to become real. So we posted in the chat the Indiegogo pre-launch campaign, and invite your friends, be aware of us. We gave, Robert, if you can post again, the link to our Mattermost. There is people that are joining in. We have different channels for applications that are being built. So there's a governance channel, and there is a field file sharing channel, and there's a lot of people and that are aggregating themselves into these large conversations, because we're figuring out that it takes all of us to do it, and that we're better together. And we're really honestly coming to you in this moment for your contribution. And we're here to do other presentations. We'll be having case studies, like next week we'll have about meta capital. We'll be sharing about 10 types of capital and how you can create applications that consider all sorts of visible and invisible flows. And we'll be sharing with Sean Edgern from Meta Integral. And if any of you have an idea of an application you want to build, please come forth. We'll be happy to support you in any way we can, because we're truly here to provide value to you all. So thank you very much to keeping your presence all to the end of this presentation. And hope to see you very, very soon.